Oh, hi, I'm Aesthetics, by the way. I've met some of you already. And I hail from Oakland, California, and I haven't been to the DC Beltway area in like 6 or 7 years, and it freaks me the fuck out, so. Or can I say that on here? Okay, cool. Thank you, George Carlin. Okay. So, right. You guys have probably, so, for example, we just got done listening to this session on what was it called? The PSS, I think? A surveillance system that is being set up where it's not actually persistent because to me persistent is something which is constant, and this system was basically you have a manned aircraft that goes up in the sky and monitors part of a city for a long time, and it's also aerial, it's not ground. So this brings me to what's going on in Oakland, California. It's called the DAC, the Domain Awareness Center, or as we call it, the DAC. So the history behind this, I want to say in 2009, something like that. The city of Oakland received a grant. It wasn't actually, it was the port of Oakland. So Oakland is one of the few port cities in America. So there's others like New York and Baltimore and so on. And most of them already actually have surveillance type systems set up. So around 2009, it's still kind of hazy on the details, but basically the city of Oakland, or the port of Oakland was offered a grant by the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, to instantiate effectively what they called the Port Awareness Center, I think it was at that point. Basically setting up surveillance cameras around the port and monitoring a number of things given it's an international port and whatnot. And it kind of I think it's actually partly implemented on the port already. And for the port, it's whatever. It's not really monitoring citizens, it's monitoring employees of the port. And further, they have their own security system, so it's not interfering with the police or anything like that. However, in the interim couple of years, what's the guy's name? I think it's Bill Brennan. Basically, the guy responsible for the New York stop and frisk and some other things is apparently involved in this too. At some point, the port authority, the port system turned into what's now called the Domain Awareness Center, wherein they wanted to, so Oakland already has traffic cameras set up, so like if you run a red light, it'll take a photo of your car, and what is it, the license plate recognition software, things like that. But it's all kind of these scattered elements that aren't, not conglomerated, not fused together. That it's not a fusion center yet, and there's fusion centers set up in other areas of the country if you search for it. I think Baltimore has one, New York City has one. DC, I think Chicago and Boston, basically any place where there's a threat or there has been some kind of an attack or any kind of infrastructure. There's 73? Holy fuck. Okay, they're and also in the middle of nowhere America in case like there's a revolt by the cows in the local farm or something. So in any case, what happened was, I think it was mid last year, the Oakland City Council basically decided to go forward with phase one of the Domain Awareness Center, which is basically coming up with a list of requirements and beginning to pull vendors. And that passed. I was actually around Amsterdam when that happened, and it made a bunch of people in Holland freak out because there was a hacker camp going on that I was at. And came back to Oakland, and I want to say from August or September of 2003 up until February of this year, there were basically protests nonstop. Because remember, this is Occupy Oakland, where Scott Olson got hit with the tear gas and all the other things. Like Oakland PD, which has been under threat of federal receivership, and they're really stupid, incompetent, not very nice police. They're kind of like the NSA, actually. So the City Council of Oakland basically approved this, not fully understanding what it was, which is basically to pull all these things together, set up a couple of other surveillance cameras as well, and pull it into this fusion center. And there's a whole lot of questions as to like who has access to it and what exactly they're monitoring and whether they're using facial recognition software. They claim they're not, but they're also not being very transparent about who the vendors are and so on. So this led to about 5 to 7 months of solid protests outside of City Hall, including some really colorful evenings at City Council, including the most recent one where there was one where there were 6 solid hours of people coming up and doing their 2-minute spiel and basically asking questions. And unlike the guy who just spoke downstairs, the people behind the DAC completely fell apart. They had absolutely no answer to any of the questions that were being asked. And remember, Oakland is home to the Black Panthers. It's home to a whole lot of activism groups. It's also home to a lot of minorities, which means when you set up one of these confederated fusion center type things, which is monitoring a bunch of stuff, and given additional tools to police who have already proved to be brutalizing all the protesters and political activists and whatnot, in a place that and not just brutalizing them, but also targeting Islamic people and black people and so on and so forth. Oakland is kind of a melting pot. You can already see where some of the tension is coming from. So how am I doing on time, by the way? Is it? Okay. Yeah. Oh, I'm good? So whenever the next speaker comes, just kick me off. So there was a whole lot of discussion on this. There was one city council meeting where Councilmember McElhaney decided to vote against it, and it was the first vote we'd had against any of the DAC stuff ever, and that was a huge victory. And in the next council meeting, and I think this was in January, I can't remember, I think Rebecca Brooks, Councilmember Brooks, proposed and was passed a resolution which basically limited the scope of the DAC back to the original plan that was the port. And further, they decided, because there's all these privacy questions coming up from people, some of them are tech workers, some of them are activists, some of them are just like, we don't need yet another basically DHS-funded Big Brother type thing intervening with us, within our lives and preventing First Amendment and peaceably assembling and so on and so forth. Uh-oh, what's up? Oh, okay. Cool, just flash me the birdie when I have to get off. It'll be the easiest way. So all of this stuff was going on, and so a resolution was proposed to pull it back to the original plan, and in addition to that, put a hold or a stop on things until an ad hoc committee, basically a privacy committee composed of constituents and representatives of the community came together and created a privacy policy that they could submit to the city council. And that's kind of where we're at right now. And we're going over a lot of the preliminary phases. By we, I was appointed to the committee along with a few other people. We're trying to get some more, how to put it, people who are aware of the issues that will come up with things like this onto it. But in general, if this goes wrong, we're going to have to answer to the city of Oakland, by which I mean the people of Oakland, which is a lot scarier than the city, because the city of Oakland is completely broke. Whereas the city of Oakland, or the people of Oakland, some of them are broke, but if you are living in Oakland and you're broke, that means that you have free time, and if you have free time and you're angry because you live in Oakland, then you're going to do things like build a 6-foot-tall papier-mâché statue of a pig, dress it in a police uniform, put it in front of City Hall in front of a line of police officers, and then take a baseball bat to it. That was an interesting night. So where we're at right now is trying to delineate the terms of the privacy policy. We've kind of set basic, I guess, guidelines, basic principles. It has to be constitutional. It has to respect what one could consider to be fundamental human rights. And one place that California differs from other states, by the way, is that the privacy is coded within the California Constitution. It hasn't actually been elucidated as to what privacy means in any context, and it seems that a lot of lawyers are afraid to actually touch this question. But it's going to be interesting because some people have actually thought, well, maybe we can begin to expand on the definition of privacy for this purpose. What's it? Oh, okay. Take this way? Test? Can you hear me still? Okay. Actually, so can I use this computer? Is this on the thingy?
Oh, I was just going to set up the next topic.
Oh, never mind. Okay, so if you go to, if you search for Domain Awareness Center, or I think it's Oakland Wiki, you can find information about this. It details a lot of the technical schematics. Another interesting thing, so phase 1 was collecting the information to just come up with, well, this is a thing that we kind of want to do. Phase 2 is vendor selection, because in order to do this, you have to have a vendor. So we get this money from DHS, which can only be spent on this fucking surveillance center. Find a vendor that city council will approve. So the first vendor they were looking at was SAIC, who I'm sure people here have heard of. In Oakland, they're basically known as a Big Brother type thing, evil. And it turns out, as they were attempting to proceed with this, some people in Oakland did a bunch of digging and found out that SAIC has ties to basically nuclear manufacturers and nuclear arms. And Oakland in, I think, 1987 passed the nuclear munitions ban, or basically a ban on the city doing business with any company with ties to nuclear weapons. And people brought this up to city council, like in the hearings, and the city council was completely caught off guard by that and immediately looked at the people who were supposed to be doing the research on the DAC vendors for the city, who were once again caught off guard and completely dumbfounded. So they decided that legally they had to scrap SAIC as being a potential vendor. So then they decided to go with another company called Schneider Electric, until the activists went and dug up yet another example of Schneider Electric having ties with nuclear arms. At which point, the city of Oakland decided, well, why don't we just waive it? We're sick of doing all this research. And they tried to grant them the waiver, but then you see the dynamic here is if one company was turned down for something and then the same issue comes up with the company number two and the waiver gets granted, that opens it up for a lawsuit. So that's kind of where they're at, and that's kind of in a standstill right now, and I think Oakland is probably kind of sick of hearing about this. They didn't realize the Pandora's box they were opening and unleashing. And it's going to be interesting to see where things go from here. I am not aware of any other city that has actually taken upon themselves to allow the citizens to have an ad hoc privacy committee where they come up with a privacy policy for a surveillance center that's effectively monitoring them. So things like data retention and access come to mind. And the lawyers here probably know better than I do because I'm not a lawyer. But I'm not aware of any other city that has taken upon themselves to do this. And I'm going to be very interested to see what comes out of Oakland compares to, say, New York or Baltimore or DC or anything else. So with that, does anyone have any questions? Did anyone listen to any of that? Okay. Nobody else? Wow, you guys are a really passive audience. What? Yeah, well, Oaklanders say a lot, it's just they don't have much to say. Oh, good question. Is the privacy policy that we're drafting online? Yes, so as it's a committee of the city of Oakland, if you go to the city of oaklandnet.com, I think, and just like any other government, the website is kind of crappy and difficult to navigate, and it's not very well put together, but the document is there if you search for it. Yes. Yes, that's actually, so the question was, is there a potential framework for other cities to have similar committees? So I don't know what the answer to that is if a city already has something instantiated, but if a city is considering instantiating a system like this, one of the purposes of us doing this and trying to craft an ideal privacy policy is for another city that's considering doing this to be able to weigh the risks and to say, well, we can look at New York's privacy policy, or we can look at Oakland's and see, maybe we can take pieces from different ones. I mean, the whole point of this is that basically this is not going away. Like, the ship has sailed, like this surveillance world exists, and the question is, what can we do about it? And as far as I'm concerned, I'd much rather have the city of Oakland be doing this than a private company, because government is much, much easier to regulate.